The whispers followed Lyra Nightshade everywhere she went, a constant companion more reliable than any friend she had ever known. Weak, broken, useless. The words echoed through the corridors of the Shadow Moon Pack House, with the persistence of a curse, branding her as the Omega who would never be strong enough to contribute anything of value to her community. At 21 years old, Lyra had lived her entire life under the weight of her body's betrayal. Born with a congenital condition that left her bones fragile and her muscles weak, she couldn't run with the pack during hunts, couldn't fight alongside them during territorial disputes, couldn't even perform the basic physical labor that most Omegas contributed without thinking. She was a burden, a mouth to feed who gave nothing back, and everyone made sure she never forgot it. "Out of the way, Lyra," Beta Marcus snarled as he shouldered past her in the narrow hallway, nearly knocking her off balance. "Some of us have actual work to do." She pressed herself against the wall and kept her eyes lowered, the familiar burn of humiliation heating her cheeks. There was no point in responding, no point in defending herself. She had learned years ago that fighting back only made things worse, that the best survival strategy for someone like her was to make herself as small and invisible as possible. The Shadow Moon Pack had tolerated her presence only because of pack law. No wolf could be abandoned or killed without cause, and being physically weak wasn't technically a crime. But tolerance was a far cry from acceptance, and Lyra had long since given up hope of ever truly belonging anywhere. As she made her way toward the kitchens where she performed the only tasks her body could handle, peeling vegetables, washing dishes, organizing supplies, the sound of excited voices drifted down the hallway. The pack was gathering in the main hall for some kind of announcement, and from the electricity in the air, it was clearly something significant. "Have you heard?" one of the younger females was saying, her voice pitched high with excitement. "The Alpha King himself is coming to visit. He's touring all the major packs in the region, looking for something. Some say he's searching for a mate. Others claim he's investigating the rumors about dark magic in the territories. Whatever the reason, we need to make a good impression," another voice responded. "This could be our chance to strengthen our alliance with the Royal Pack, maybe even secure some trade agreements or protection treaties." Lyra felt her stomach drop as she processed the information. The Alpha King was coming here, to her small, insignificant pack. And that meant inspection and evaluation, and all the ways in which the Shadow Moon Wolves would try to prove their worth and strength. Which also meant that someone like her needed to be even more invisible than usual. Alpha King Kale Stormborn was a legend among their kind, spoken of in tones that mixed reverence with healthy fear. He had ruled for over 2 centuries, maintaining peace through a combination of strategic brilliance and overwhelming power. Stories claimed he could shift into his wolf form with just a thought, that his alpha command could force submission from any wolf regardless of rank, that he had once defeated an entire rebel pack single-handedly. The idea of someone like him seeing someone like her made Lyra want to disappear entirely. She could already imagine his disgust at encountering such a defective member of the species, the disappointment in his eyes when he realized that the Shadow Moon Pack harbored such weakness. "Lyra!" The sharp voice of the pack's head Omega, Mistress Helena, cut through her spiraling thoughts. "Where have you been? I've been looking everywhere for you." "I'm sorry, Mistress. I was just heading to the kitchens to—" "Never mind that now. The Alpha King arrives within the hour, and I need every available hand helping with preparations." Helena's expression was sour with obvious distaste. "Even yours, useless as it may be. Go to the storage rooms and fetch the good linens, and for Moon's sake, try not to drop anything or break anything. We can't afford to look incompetent in front of royalty." Lyra nodded quickly and hurried toward the storage areas, her heart pounding with anxiety. The storage rooms were in the basement level of the pack house, down 2 flights of stairs that always left her breathless and aching. But she had learned to push through the pain, to ignore the way her joints protested and her muscles trembled with effort. The basement was cool and dim, lit only by widely spaced bulbs that cast long shadows between the shelving units. Lyra moved carefully through the space, searching for the trunk where the formal linens were kept. The Shadow Moon Pack didn't have many occasions to use their finest materials, so everything was packed away in preservation spells that kept the fabrics fresh despite years of storage. She had just located the correct trunk and was struggling to lift the heavy lid when a strange sensation washed over her. It started as a tingling at the base of her skull, then spread through her entire body like warm honey, making her gasp with surprise. The feeling was familiar yet foreign, like remembering a dream from childhood that had been forgotten for years. Without conscious thought, Lyra began to hum. The melody that emerged from her throat was ancient and haunting, notes that seemed to resonate with something fundamental in the fabric of reality itself. She had always loved music, had always found solace in singing when she was alone. But this was different. This felt like power. The air around her began to shimmer slightly, dust motes dancing in patterns that defied natural physics. The shadows in the corners seemed to lean closer, drawn by the sound of her voice like moths to flame. And deep within her chest, something that had always been dormant suddenly stirred to life. "What are you doing down here?" The sharp question shattered her concentration, and the strange sensations vanished instantly. Lyra spun around to find Beta Marcus standing at the bottom of the stairs, his expression suspicious and hostile. "Mistress Helena sent me to fetch the formal linens," she stammered, her voice returning to its usual quiet tone. "For the Alpha King's visit." Marcus's eyes narrowed as he studied her, his nostrils flaring slightly as if trying to detect something in her scent. "Were you singing just now?" I was just humming to myself. I'm sorry if I disturbed you." He didn't look convinced, but after a moment he jerked his head toward the trunk. "Well, hurry up then. The Alpha King's caravan has been spotted approaching the territory. Everyone needs to be in position within 15 minutes. As Marcus disappeared back up the stairs, Lyra released a shaky breath and tried to calm her racing heart. That strange feeling, that inexplicable power that had surged through her when she sang. What was that? She had been humming and singing to herself for years, finding comfort in music when everything else in her life was painful and difficult. But she had never experienced anything like that before. Pushing the questions aside for later contemplation, Lyra managed to extract several sets of formal linens from the trunk and began the arduous journey back up to the main level. By the time she reached the top of the second flight of stairs, her legs were trembling with exhaustion and her breathing came in short, painful gasps. "There you are." Mistress Helena snatched the linens from her arms without a word of thanks. "You took forever. The Alpha King's caravan is pulling through the gates right now. Get to the kitchens and stay there. I don't want him seeing you and getting the wrong impression about our pack." The dismissal was familiar and expected, but it still stung. Lyra made her way to the kitchens as instructed, taking up a position near the back entrance where she could fulfill her duties without being visible to any important visitors. Through the narrow window above the washing station, she could see the main courtyard where pack members were assembling in formal ranks to greet their distinguished guest. The Alpha King's arrival was marked by a sudden hush that fell over the entire compound, as if even the wind itself was holding its breath in anticipation. Through her limited vantage point, Lyra could see only glimpses of the royal procession. Expensive vehicles, immaculately dressed guards, and at the center of it all, a figure whose presence seemed to draw all available light toward him, like a living black hole. Even from a distance, even catching only brief glimpses through a small window, Lyra could feel the power radiating from Alpha King Kale. It was like standing near a bonfire, feeling the heat and energy without needing to see the flames directly. Her Omega nature recognized his alpha dominance with an intensity that made her knees weak, and she had to grip the edge of the sink to keep herself upright. The formal greetings and speeches seemed to last forever, long enough that Lyra was able to finish washing an entire load of dishes and start organizing the pantry. She tried to focus on her tasks and ignore the gathering in the courtyard, but it was impossible not to be aware of the Alpha King's presence. He was like a storm front moving through their territory, impossible to ignore even when you weren't looking directly at it. All pack members are to assemble in the Great Hall immediately, came the announcement through the pack link, the mental communication that connected all members of the Shadow Moon Pack. The Alpha King wishes to address us all. Lyra's stomach clenched with dread. An assembly meant she would have to be visible, would have to stand among her packmates while their weaknesses and failures were on display for royal judgment. But disobeying a direct order wasn't an option, so she dried her hands and made her way reluctantly toward the Great Hall. The space was already packed when she arrived, wolves of all ranks pressed together in a show of unity and strength. Lyra slipped in through a side entrance and found a spot in the very back corner, behind a support pillar that partially hid her from view. From this position, she could see the raised platform at the front of the hall where Alpha King Kale stood alongside the Shadow Moon Pack's leadership. This was the first time Lyra had seen him clearly, and the sight stole what little breath she had left. The Alpha King was tall and powerfully built, with dark hair that fell to his shoulders and eyes that seemed to shift between gold and amber depending on the light. He wore formal clothing that somehow managed to look both elegant and dangerous, and the way he carried himself spoke of absolute confidence born from centuries of unchallenged authority. But it was more than just his physical appearance that captivated her attention. There was something about the way he moved, the way he observed everything around him with the focused intensity of a predator, that made her wolf sit up and take notice in ways she had never experienced before. Wolves of the Shadow Moon Pack. His voice carried easily through the crowded hall without any apparent effort, rich and commanding in ways that made every wolf present straighten unconsciously. I thank you for your hospitality and for gathering on such short notice. My purpose in visiting your territory is twofold. First, I am investigating reports of unusual magical activity in this region. Dark forces that have been dormant for centuries are beginning to stir, and I need to ensure that all packs under my protection are aware and prepared. A murmur of concern rippled through the assembled wolves. Dark magic was the stuff of old legends and cautionary tales, not something most modern packs worried about in their daily lives. Second, the Alpha King continued, his golden eyes scanning the crowd with an intensity that made Lyra shrink further behind her pillar. I am searching for something specific. An old prophecy speaks of a power that will be needed in the coming darkness, a gift that has been hidden or forgotten, but which must be found and awakened before it's too late. What kind of power, Your Majesty? Alpha Raymond of the Shadow Moon Pack asked, his voice carrying a note of eager interest. If such a power existed within his territory, claiming credit for it could bring significant prestige. The prophecy is unclear on specifics, Kale admitted, but it speaks of a voice that can move heaven and earth, of songs that can heal or harm, of music that bridges the gap between the physical world and the realm of pure spirit. In ancient times, such gifts were called Siren abilities, though most modern wolves believe they were merely myths. Lyra felt her blood run cold as the Alpha King's words echoed in her mind. A voice that can move heaven and earth, songs that can heal or harm. The strange sensations she had experienced in the basement suddenly took on new and terrifying significance. I assure you, Your Majesty, if any member of our pack possessed such abilities, we would know about it, Alpha Raymond said with absolute confidence. We keep careful records of all special talents and abilities. There's nothing like what you're describing here. Perhaps, Kale said thoughtfully, his gaze still roaming across the assembled wolves, as if searching for something only he could see. Or perhaps the gift has been dormant, waiting for the right circumstances to awaken. I would like to interview each of your pack members individually, if you'll permit it. The request was phrased politely, but everyone present understood it was not actually a request. An Alpha King didn't ask permission. He simply stated what would happen next. The interviews took place in Alpha Raymond's office, with each pack member called in order of rank. Alphas and Betas first, then regular members, then Omegas. By the time they reached the lowest-ranking Omegas, several hours had passed, and Lyra was trembling with exhaustion from standing in the crowded hall. "Lyra Nightshade," Mistress Helena called out with obvious reluctance. "You're next." Every eye in the hall turned toward her as she emerged from behind the pillar, and Lyra felt the familiar weight of their judgment pressing down on her shoulders. She kept her gaze fixed on the floor as she made her way to the office, acutely aware of the whispers that followed in her wake. "That's the weak one," someone murmured. "Can barely walk without getting winded. Why is the Alpha King wasting time on her? She doesn't have any special abilities. She barely has the strength to survive day to day." The office door was open when she arrived, and she paused in the doorway to catch her breath and gather what little courage she possessed. Alpha King Kale sat behind the desk, reviewing notes on a tablet, but he looked up immediately when she appeared. Their eyes met, and the world seemed to tilt sideways. Lyra felt that same strange tingling sensation from the basement, but magnified 100-fold. It rushed through her body like a wildfire, igniting every nerve ending and making her gasp with the intensity of it. The Alpha King's expression shifted, his eyes widening slightly with what looked like recognition or surprise. For several heartbeats, they simply stared at each other while something fundamental passed between them. Some connection or understanding that defied logical explanation. "Come in," he said finally, his voice rougher than it had been before. "Close the door behind you." Lyra obeyed on shaking legs, moving carefully into the office and easing the door shut. The space suddenly felt very small and intimate, despite being one of the larger rooms in the pack house. She kept her eyes lowered as she had been taught, not daring to look directly at him again. "Your name is Lyra Nightshade?" "Yes, Your Majesty." "And you're an Omega in this pack?" "Yes, Your Majesty." He was quiet for a moment, and she could feel the weight of his gaze studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. "You're very quiet. The others I've interviewed today have been eager to talk, to prove themselves worthy of my attention, but you seem almost afraid to be here." "I apologize if I've offended you, Your Majesty. I mean, no disrespect." "You haven't offended me. I'm simply curious." She heard the sound of him standing, footsteps approaching until he was close enough that she could smell the complex layers of his alpha scent, pine and leather, and something that reminded her of thunderstorms. "Look at me, Lyra." The command was gentle but absolute, impossible to disobey. She raised her eyes slowly until they met his, and again felt that strange rush of power and recognition that made her head spin. "Tell me about yourself," he said softly. "What do you do for the Shadow Moon Pack? What are your strengths, your talents?" The questions were standard, probably asked of every wolf he had interviewed. But coming from him, directed at her with those impossibly golden eyes fixed on her face, they felt significant in ways she couldn't articulate. "I work in the kitchens, Your Majesty. Washing dishes, preparing vegetables, organizing supplies. I'm not strong enough for more physical labor." "Not strong enough physically," he repeated thoughtfully. "What about other kinds of strength? Mental, emotional, spiritual?" The question caught her off guard. No one had ever asked her about non-physical strengths before, had never considered that she might have value beyond her ability to perform manual labor. I don't know, Your Majesty. I've never really thought about it." "Do you have any hobbies, things you do for enjoyment when you're not working?" She hesitated, unsure if the truth would sound ridiculous. "I sing sometimes, when I'm alone. Music has always brought me comfort." The moment the words left her mouth, she felt the air in the room change. The Alpha King's entire body went still in that predatory way that wolves did when they caught the scent of prey, and his eyes seemed to glow with inner fire. "You sing," he repeated, his voice carefully neutral. "How often? In what circumstances?" "Just whenever I'm alone and feeling sad or overwhelmed. It helps calm my mind, gives me something to focus on besides the pain. She realized too late that admitting to chronic pain probably made her sound even weaker than her reputation suggested. I'm sorry. I know it's not particularly useful. I should focus more on my actual duties instead of sing for me. The command cut through her rambling apology like a blade, simple and direct and absolutely impossible to misunderstand. Lyra's eyes widened in shock as she processed what he was asking. Your Majesty? Sing for me, he repeated, moving even closer until they were separated by barely a foot of space. Right now, whatever song comes naturally to you. I'm not very good. And I don't think it would be appropriate to. That wasn't a request, Lyra. His voice carried the weight of alpha command now, making her omega nature sit up and take notice. Sing for me, now. There was no refusing a direct command from the Alpha King, not without serious consequences. Lyra took a shaky breath and tried to think of what song to perform, her mind going blank with panic before finally settling on one of the old lullabies her mother had taught her before she died. She opened her mouth and began to sing, her voice wavering at first with nervousness. The melody was simple and haunting, words in the old tongue that most modern wolves no longer understood. But as she continued, something began to change. The power that had stirred in the basement came roaring back to life, flooding through her body with an intensity that made her gasp between verses. Her voice strengthened and deepened, taking on resonances that shouldn't have been possible from a human throat. The air around them began to shimmer and pulse in rhythm with her song, and she could feel reality itself beginning to bend toward her will. Through the office walls, she could hear sounds of commotion in the great hall. Wolves crying out in surprise or wonder, furniture scraping against floors as people moved without meaning to, the building itself seeming to resonate with the frequencies of her voice. But Lyra's attention was fixed entirely on Alpha King Kale, and what she saw in his face made her heart race with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. His eyes had gone completely gold, his wolf rising to the surface. But unlike the others who were clearly falling under her song's spell, he remained in perfect control. He was watching her with an expression of wonder and recognition, as if he was seeing something he had been searching for his entire long life. She sang 3 full verses before her voice finally broke from the strain of channeling so much power. The moment she stopped, the effects began to fade, the shimmering air returning to normal, and the sounds of confusion from the great hall diminishing. For several long moments, they simply stared at each other in the aftermath of what had just occurred. Lyra was trembling with exhaustion and shock, hardly able to believe what had just happened. That power, that impossible, incredible power. It had been inside her all along? By the moon goddess, Kale breathed, reaching out to steady her as her legs threatened to give out. You're a siren. A true, fully manifested siren. I can't believe it. After all this time, all these years of searching, you've been here all along. I don't understand, Lyra whispered, allowing him to guide her into a chair before her trembling legs gave out completely. What just happened? What did I do? You awakened a gift that hasn't been seen in over 500 years, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Siren abilities were once common among our kind, but they faded as we became more focused on physical strength and fighting prowess. Most modern wolves don't even believe they ever truly existed. But what does it mean? What can I do with this power? Based on what I just witnessed and felt? He crouched down so they were at eye level, his expression intense. Your voice can influence emotions, can compel obedience even from strong-willed alphas, can heal physical and spiritual wounds, and potentially much more once you learn to control it properly. In the wrong hands, such abilities could be devastatingly dangerous. In the right hands, they could save us all. The implications were staggering. Lyra, who had spent her entire life being told she was weak and useless, apparently possessed one of the rarest and most powerful gifts their species had ever produced. "Why me?" she asked, voicing the question that seemed most relevant. "Why would such power manifest in someone like me? Someone who can barely even function as a normal wolf?" Kale's expression softened with understanding. "Because true power has never been about physical strength, Lyra. The moon goddess gives gifts based on what each soul needs and can handle, not based on what society thinks is valuable. Your physical weakness may have actually protected your gift, kept it dormant and hidden until the right moment for it to emerge." A knock on the door interrupted their conversation, and Alpha Raymond poked his head in without waiting for permission to enter. His expression was a mixture of confusion and alarm. "Your Majesty, I apologize for the interruption, but there's been some kind of incident. Half the pack seems to have been affected by something. They're reporting feelings of euphoria, visions, compulsions to dance or cry or confess secrets. We don't know what caused it, but it's under control." Kyle cut him off smoothly, rising to his full height. "The incident was a test of the pack's sensitivity to certain types of magical influence. Nothing to be concerned about." Raymond looked skeptical, but didn't dare question the Alpha King's explanation. His gaze shifted to Lyra, still sitting trembling in the chair, and his expression hardened with familiar disdain. "Was there anything else you needed from this one, Your Majesty? She's quite useless for most purposes, but I suppose even broken Omegas have to be interviewed." The temperature in the room seemed to drop about 20 degrees, as Kale turned the full force of his alpha presence on the Shadow Moon leader. When he spoke, his voice carried a warning that made even Lyra's wolf cringe in instinctive submission. "You will speak of her with respect, Raymond. This broken Omega, as you so ignorantly called her, is worth more than your entire pack combined. She possesses a gift that makes her invaluable to our entire species, and from this moment forward, she is under my personal protection." Raymond's face went pale as he realized he had severely miscalculated the situation. "Your Majesty, I had no idea. If she has abilities we weren't aware of, she does. And the fact that you never bothered to look beyond her physical limitations speaks volumes about the quality of your leadership." Kale's tone was scathing. "Lyra will be leaving with me when I depart tomorrow morning. You can consider this my official notice of pack transfer." The words hit Lyra like a physical shock. Leaving the Shadow Moon pack, going with the Alpha King, her mind reeled with the implications. "Of course, Your Majesty," Raymond stammered, clearly trying to salvage what remained of his dignity. "Whatever you think is best. We're honored that one of our members will serve the royal pack. Get out." The command was quiet but absolute, and Raymond practically fled from the office. Once they were alone again, Kale turned back to Lyra with an expression that had softened considerably from the cold fury he had displayed moments before. "I apologize if I overstepped," he said gently. "I should have asked if you wanted to leave rather than simply announcing it. But Lyra, I meant what I said. You have a gift that could be crucial in the coming darkness, and you need proper training and protection. Things I can provide in ways this pack clearly cannot." "I don't know what to say," she admitted, her mind still spinning with everything that had happened in the last hour. "This morning I was just a kitchen worker that everyone pitied or despised. Now you're telling me I have some legendary power and you want me to join the royal pack. I know it's overwhelming and will take things slowly, I promise. But Lyra..." He hesitated, as if choosing his next words carefully. "There's something else you need to know. When you sang, when your power manifested fully for the first time, I felt something beyond just recognition of your abilities." His golden eyes met hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "The mate bond, Lyra. I felt the mate bond forming between us. You're not just a siren who I need for her abilities. You're my destined partner, the other half of my soul that I've been searching for across 2 centuries of existence." The revelation should have been the most shocking thing that had happened that day, but somehow it felt almost inevitable. That strange connection she had felt from the moment their eyes met, the way her power had responded to his presence, the sense of rightness that permeated the air between them. Of course it was the mate bond. "That's impossible," she whispered, even as her wolf was practically howling with joy at the knowledge. "I'm just a broken Omega from a minor pack. You're the Alpha King. How could we possibly be mates?" "The moon goddess doesn't care about rank or status when she creates mate bonds," Kale said, moving closer and taking her hands gently in his. "She pairs souls that complement each other, that make each other stronger and more complete. And Lyra, from the moment I saw you, from the moment I heard your voice, I knew. You're what I've been missing all these years." Tears gathered in her eyes as the truth of his words settled into her bones. After a lifetime of being told she was worthless, of believing that she would never be wanted or valued by anyone, here was the most powerful wolf in existence, telling her she was his destined mate. "I'm scared," she admitted, allowing the vulnerability to show in her voice. "I don't know how to be a siren. I don't know how to be a royal mate. I don't know if I'm strong enough for any of this." "You're stronger than you realize," he assured her, his thumbs rubbing gentle circles on the backs of her hands. "Your body may be fragile, but your spirit is unbreakable. You've survived years of neglect and dismissal, years of being undervalued and overlooked, and you still found beauty in music and kindness in your heart. That kind of strength is rarer and more valuable than any physical prowess." The words broke something open inside her, all the pain and loneliness and desperate yearning for acceptance that she had been holding back for so long. She found herself pulled into his arms, crying against his chest while he held her with infinite gentleness and murmured reassurances in the old tongue. "You're safe now," he promised. "You're valued. You're exactly where you're meant to be." As her tears gradually subsided and exhaustion from the day's emotional upheavals began to catch up with her, Lyra allowed herself to relax into his embrace. For the first time in her life, she felt truly protected and cared for, as if she had finally found the home she had been searching for without even knowing it. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Now we rest. Tomorrow we travel to the royal territory, where you'll meet my pack and begin your training as both a siren and a future queen. It won't be easy. Mastering your abilities will take time and effort, and there will be challenges as we navigate the political implications of our bond. But Lyra, I promise you this. I will never let anyone make you feel weak or worthless again. Your value doesn't come from your physical strength. It comes from your heart, your spirit, and the incredible gift you carry." That night, as Lyra lay in bed trying to process everything that had changed, she found herself humming softly to herself. The melody that emerged was new, something she had never heard before, but it felt ancient and significant. Through the walls, she could sense the pack settling into peaceful sleep, influenced by the gentle lullaby she was creating. This was her power. This was her gift. And tomorrow, she would begin learning how to use it, not just to soothe and calm, but to heal and protect and maybe even change the world. The weak Omega, who everyone had dismissed and pitied, was about to become one of the most important figures in wolf history. And it all started with two simple words from an Alpha King who had seen past her broken body to the unbreakable spirit within. "Sing for me." The command that had revealed her true nature, that had changed her destiny, that had brought her face to face with the mate she never imagined she could have. As sleep finally claimed her, Lyra smiled and allowed herself to dream of the future for the first time in her life. A future full of music and magic, power and purpose, love and belonging. Everything she had never dared to hope for, now within reach because one person had bothered to look beyond the obvious and see the truth beneath. She wasn't broken. She never had been. She was exactly what she was meant to be, a siren, a mate, a queen in waiting. And her song was just beginning.